Hey guys, my name is Jared.
My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be telling you guys our story of how we went from a single mother household growing up in a middle class family to now combined owning over 150 Section 8 rental properties.
So I'm going to start off a little bit with my story. Our stories are very similar. There's a little bit of differences throughout. So starting off at about 16, 17 years old, we both worked at JCPenney, a retail store in our area. We came from Santa Clarita. It's a suburb right outside of LA, and I worked at JCPenney over there. At JCPenney, I mean, it's just like any other job. So you have to go around their schedule, what time you wake up, the time you clock in, the time you clock out. You're just going around someone else's schedule, obviously. And that was for me the biggest turning point working at JCPenney. It was a seasonal job. We were only there for 3 months. But just from working at that job, it was very clear to me that I did not want to be working for anyone else ever again after that job. I was very happy to leave that seasonal position. And after that point moving forward, I essentially was trying to do anything that I could to figure out about finances, to figure out how I would be able to escape that 9-to-5 rat race. So I took a finance class in my senior year of high school. In this finance class, they started talking about real estate. They were explaining how over 90% of all millionaires invest in real estate for the passive income, for the tax write-offs, and all the benefits that come with real estate investing. So immediately I got very hooked with that. I started listening to real estate podcasts, reading real estate books, doing everything that I could to educate myself with real estate investing. And that was pretty much always the end goal for me, was to get to a position where I had a bunch of rental properties that were bringing in passive income so that I never had to work another day in my life. The only problem was that I didn't have the money to invest in real estate or the actual experience to do it. That's when I started looking into actually becoming a real estate agent. And coincidentally enough, my best friend's mom was actually a very high-end real estate agent in the area that we lived in. So I told her about my situation, and she said, hey, why don't you come join my team? I'll show you the ropes, show you how to do real estate, and you could take that knowledge to invest in real estate with. So I did that. I was 17 years old, still in high school, and I started shadowing her. Her name is Kathleen. Very great mentor. And pretty much at 17 years old, I was just taking in all the information that I could from her so that as soon as I turned 18 years old, I can get licensed as a real estate agent and actually start going right into action with it. So I shadowed her for about, I would say, 2 months before Jacob came along as well. So I'll let Jacob tell his side of the story to get to that point as well.
Yeah, so on my end, it was a similar start. Jared and I both started working at JCPenney at the same time. My ambitions were a little bit different than his. At that point in time, I wanted to be a doctor. I'd always wanted to go into medicine because honestly, I didn't really care about how I did it. I just wanted to make the most amount of money as possible, even if that meant working 80-hour weeks. So I didn't really mind working that much. I wanted to go out, be a doctor, go to college for 10 years, and then do that to make $400,000 to $500,000 a year as an anesthesiologist or maybe even a plastic surgeon. Ultimately, obviously that didn't end up happening. Now, for me, what it ended up happening was after I got out of high school, I started college as a biology major, and quickly after that, I switched to communications. The reason was because I spoke with Kathleen, she sat me down, she talked to me about the pros and cons of going into something like medicine versus going into something like real estate, where medicine, there's always gonna be a demand and a need for doctors. I'm guaranteed to get that consistent income year over year. As a real estate agent, it may not be guaranteed, but the income was so much higher because there's no ceiling to how much money you can make. So for me, the choice was pretty clear. She had only been in real estate for 5 years when I spoke with her, and she was already clearing more than a doctor did every single year consistently. So I kind of understood. I've always been a hard worker. I understood the fact that as long as I was working hard, putting in the hours and putting in the time into that field, that I would ultimately end up making more as a real estate agent. And I wouldn't have to spend 10 years in school and have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt.
So at that point, both of us were shadowing Kathleen, and then right when I turned 18, both Jacob and I actually got licensed as agents, so we were now allowed to actually talk to people and actually sell real estate. What we were doing essentially is Jacob and I were doing all the marketing on our end. We were doing packages we were dropping off every single day. We were cold calling for hours every single day. And any lead that we brought in, Kathleen would help us on that deal in the beginning because obviously we didn't really know what we were doing. So she would help us on those deals, and Jacob and I were all on the same deal, so we would split our commission, she would take a portion of the commission as well. So Jacob and I ended up making a very, very similar amount of money throughout the duration of us being real estate agents. And after about 2 years of doing this, we made, each of us made a little over $100,000, and we were able to save up about $40,000 of that to put towards investing, after taxes, after all of our personal expenses. We had about $40,000 to invest. And immediately that's when I was like, okay, this is it. This is when we can start investing in real estate. Now it just comes down to how we're gonna invest in real estate. So I started looking at cheap homes. That was kind of the first thing I thought of because in my mind, we had $40,000. It was a good amount of money, but it wasn't enough to just go buy $500,000, $1 million properties. So my first place I was looking was actually St. Louis. I was looking at $100,000 properties out there. because actually one of our partners in real estate was buying cheap homes out there and he was renting them out to regular tenants. So we were like, okay, we'll just do the same thing as him. A few months into him doing this though, all his tenants, they started having problems. They started trashing the place. They stopped paying their rents. They started constantly complaining. So he had to sell all of his properties. He sold them all at a loss. He lost a bunch of money doing that. So at that point, I kind of took a step back. I'm like, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I have to save up a little bit more. Maybe I have to figure something else out. But then we heard about Section 8 and it literally kind of just solved all the problems that I had in my mind for the regular tenants at that price point, where Section 8 tenants, I mean, they're getting guaranteed rent, so you don't have to worry about those late or missed rental payments. They have to follow the lease agreement, so you know they're going to be higher quality tenants as long as you screen them properly. It essentially just made sense. So that's when we started looking for our first Section 8 rental property. And I'll let you kind of explain how we actually bought those first homes and how we continued from there.
Yeah, on the very first properties for Jared and I, we had heard of creative financing, but we didn't know a whole lot about it. And our specialty was with bank loans because that's what all of our clients who were buying properties and personal residences were using. So the first thing we did was go to our lender who was helping us help our clients buy properties in California. And that's the first time we'd heard of lender minimums. He didn't loan anything under $150,000, so we couldn't use him for the types of properties we were looking at. We ended up finding another lender out in the Midwest. He was able to give us loans on these properties. My property was just over $100,000. Used a bank loan on that one, and then Jared's was right around the same price point, I believe. And once we bought those properties, we realized that very quickly we weren't going to be able to buy all of our properties this way, and it wasn't an efficient way to scale our portfolios. So we started looking at some of these other options with the creative financing realm. That's how we kind of stumbled on seller financing and really started to leverage that to be able to buy properties with very small down payments. I mean, we are buying properties anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000.
And yeah, just to add on top of that, my first property using a bank loan, it was about $27,000 all in after the 20% down payment, the closing costs, and the repair costs. And yeah, I mean, it was cash flowing $700 a month, but I mean, I just couldn't scale very effectively. I only had $40,000. I couldn't even afford another one. So that's really what pushed us towards that creative financing route. It was almost like something we had to do if we wanted to scale more. And with each of the properties that we started buying, we just started taking the cash flow from each of the houses we were buying. And in the beginning, we were still real estate agents as well for about the first year of investing. So all the money we were making as real estate agents, all the cash flow we were getting, we were just putting it right back into buying as many properties as we could. And that started turning into a snowball effect very quickly. In my first year of buying Section 8 rental properties, obviously I was the slowest. I was able to get to 10 Section 8 properties. And these were cash flowing $5,000 every single month, which is pretty much the same amount, if not a little bit more than I was making as a real estate agent. So at that point, I was able to kind of step back from being a real estate agent and just purely focus on buying Section 8 rental properties. And in my second year, with using a lot of creative financing and actually getting into bigger portfolio deals as well, I was able to get to 48 Section 8 rental properties. And now I'm about 2.5 years into it. I'm at 83 Section 8 rental properties. Jacob has 68. So combined, we have 151 Section 8 rental properties that are cash flowing a combined total of over $100,000 every single month.
And I do also want to jump in and say that the reason that even though I'm the older brother, Jared has more properties than me is because I chose to go to college. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, I started off as a biology major, but I ended up ultimately switching to communications. I've always wanted a college degree. It's just something that I wanted, and it was a goal of mine since I was a young kid. And I decided to finish out that degree, but that did end up costing money. I paid for my entire college on my own. So essentially that came out of my portfolio, and instead of being able to invest that money into Section 8 properties, I put it towards a college degree, which honestly I've never even used. And honestly, getting the college degree, I would say was probably not worth it because I was putting a lot of time, money, and energy into that. And at the same time, I was also buying Section 8 rental properties, working full-time as a real estate agent while getting an honors in college, all at the same time when I could have been putting all that time and energy into negotiating deals and calling for seller finance properties.
So basically that's our story on how we got started investing in Section 8 to get to the point where we're at today. Point is, you don't need a lot of money to get started with something like this. You don't need a lot of time. We started at 20 years old, 21 for Jacob. Really, the only thing you need is about $8,000 to get started with buying your first Section 8 rental property that's going to cash flow you about $500 to $800 every single month. And because we're using creative financing, you don't need good credit. You don't need good income history. You don't even need to be a US citizen. And it takes about 20 to 30 minutes a day. If you want to learn exactly how we do this, we created a completely free blueprint for you to walk you through the step-by-step process that we go through to buy these Section 8 rental properties. And if you want to get access to that, we have a link down below. Just go ahead and click that link. Again, it's completely free, and that'll at least get your foot in the door to starting to get your first property so that you can eventually get to the same position that we're in the next few years.